The DMV office on Peachtree Street buzzed with frustration. Long lines snaked past faded chairs and peeling posters warning against identity theft. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, humming louder than the grumbles of exhausted customers. In the middle of the chaos stood Officer Jason Militor, broad-shouldered and carrying the smug authority of a man who relished small power. His uniform was perfectly pressed, badge gleaming, jaw clenched as he towered over a frail woman fumbling with a stack of paperwork. "Ma'am, I don't have all day," Jason snapped, his voice carrying across the crowded room. "If you can't fill out a simple form, maybe you shouldn't be driving." The woman Lena Parker clutched her cane, her pale fingers trembling as they hovered over the counter. Her dark glasses masked vacant eyes, but the sorrow and quiet determination etched into her face were impossible to miss. Mid-30s, delicate frame, draped in a modest black blouse. She stood out like a brittle branch in a storm. "I'm not here to cause trouble," Lena said softly, her voice shaking with restrained emotion. I need to renew my husband's vehicle registration." "I don't have anyone else to." Jason scoffed loudly, snatching the documents from her hesitant grip. His eyes darted across the forms with exaggerated scrutiny before he let the papers slip from his hand, scattering them onto the grimy floor. "You people always have a story," he sneered, shaking his head. "Play the victim, tug at heartstrings. But rules are rules. You can't cheat the system." A hush fell over the nearby crowd. Some looked away. Others stared at the floor, uncomfortable but unwilling to intervene. The muffled buzz of ticket numbers being called out punctuated the tense silence, but no one moved. Jason chuckled under his breath, already turning to dismiss her. "Maybe next time, try coming prepared instead of pulling the blind routine." Lena's hand trembled as she reached down, her fingers brushing over the weathered dog tags hanging around her neck, the only thing left of her husband, Sergeant Daniel Parker, gone 6 months now, but still shaping every moment of her fractured world. Her voice, barely more than a whisper, cut through the thick air. Steely with quiet resolve, "You have no idea who you just disrespected." The rhythm of Lena Parker's life used to be simpler, melody of ordinary moments strung together with quiet dignity. Before everything changed, she was a music teacher at the local elementary school in Decatur, the kind who believed every child's voice deserved to be heard. Her days were filled with chalk-dusted piano keys, off-tune recorders, and the innocent laughter of children trying to master their first song. It wasn't glamorous, but it was hers. Evenings were 4 home small, but filled with warmth shared with her husband. Marcus Parker, a man as steady as the sunrise and twice as dependable. Marcus had worn his army uniform with quiet pride, never one to boast about his service, though his eyes carried the weight of sacrifice. He'd survived 2 deployments and returned with scars he never spoke of. To Lena, he was more than a soldier. He was her anchor, her safe place when the world felt uncertain. They lived modestly in a little house on the east side. Nothing flashy, but every chipped corner and creaking floorboard told the story of a life built together. Then came the knock on the door. The folded flag, the words that shattered everything. Marcus was gone killed in service just 6 months ago. The funeral was a blur of condolences and stiff uniforms. After the crowds disappeared, Lena was left with silence, empty spaces, and grief so sharp it could cut through bone. It wasn't just Marcus's death that unraveled her life. The stress and heartache accelerated her vision, loss diagnosed years earlier as a degenerative condition, but manageable then. Now, with her world blurred and closing in, She faced every day as a battlefield. Her cane became an extension of herself, but pride kept her from asking for help. She refused to be pitied. The only thing she clung to was Marcus's old truck. It still smelled faintly of his cologne, worn leather seats cracked with age but familiar beneath her fingertips. The truck was more than transportation, it was her independence, her link to Marcus, her quiet rebellion against helplessness. But the vehicle registration had lapsed in the chaos of grief, and now the overdue penalties were stacking up. Today's DMV appointment was her last shot to resolve it before fines made it impossible. She came prepared, rehearsed every step, refusing to crumble under bureaucracy. But she hadn't prepared for Officer Jason Miller. Jason had seen cases like Lena's before, or so he thought. After a string of complaints from his last post in making claims of mistreatment, arrogance, excessive pride, he'd been quietly transferred to the Atlanta office. To him, those accusations were nothing but misunderstandings. He was firm, not cruel. The world was full of people trying to milk sympathy, manipulate rules with sad stories and fragile appearances. It hardened him. In Lena, he didn't see grief or resilience. He saw just another manipulator, weaving tragedy into entitlement. Her cane, her trembling hands, it read like a performance to him, another ploy to bypass the system. His resentment ran deep. The system was supposed to be fair, but to many people, in his eyes, exploited cracks for their own gain. It was his job to hold the line, to expose the fakes, to remind them that rules applied to everyone. Jason didn't know about Marcus. He didn't know about the sleepless nights, the hospital visits, the quiet war Lena fought every morning just to function. All he saw was another case, and in dismissing her, in publicly mocking her blindness, he believed he was standing his ground. What he couldn't see, what none of the bystanders saw, was that Lena Parker was no victim. Her resolve ran deeper than pity, and the quiet defiance simmering beneath her grief was far from finished. Hours after the confrontation at the DMV, Jason Miller, still riding the high of authority, filed an official report labeling Lena Parker as non-compliant and flagged her case for potential fraud investigation. His language was calculated, vague enough to avoid direct accusations, sharp enough to trigger bureaucratic red tape. To him, it was just another way to keep so-called manipulators in check. To Lena, it became another door slamming shut. Humiliated and exhausted, Lena returned home, the weight of the morning pressing hard against her chest. She barely made it to her worn sofa before the tears came. Frustration, grief, and helplessness tangled into one unbearable knot. Her husband's dog tags clinked softly as she leaned forward, hands trembling, trying to breathe through the ache. But the humiliation wasn't done. A crisp legal notice lay wedged in her mailbox, stamped with the official seal of the city's Motor Vehicle Department. Her heart sank as she read the words, "Asterisk, your vehicle is being impounded pending further investigation of registration fraud and compliance violations. Asterisk, the truck Marcus's old, rusted, but reliable truck was her last thread of independence. Without it, the walls of her world would close in completely. No transportation meant missed doctor's appointments, no grocery runs, no escape from the isolation that had grown heavier with each passing day. Panic and despair clawed at her, but she didn't have the luxury of falling apart for long. That evening, a knock sounded at her door. When she opened it, Detective Elijah Reed stood there, his steady, familiar presence grounding her for the first time in weeks. Early 40s, broad-shouldered, quiet intensity radiating from him. Elijah had been Marcus's best friend since boot camp, a man of few words but unwavering loyalty. One look at Lena's tear-streaked face, the legal notice trembling in her hand, and Elijah's jaw clenched with restrained fury. "Tell me what happened," he said, stepping inside without hesitation. Lena recounted everything: the DMV, the insults, the false accusations. Elijah listened, his expression hardening with each detail. "I'll look into him," Elijah promised, his voice low but resolute. "Jason Miller doesn't get to bury people like this. Not you." And in that quiet vow, Lena felt the first flicker of hope pierce through the haze. Officer Jason Miller wasn't finished with Lena Parker. After their clash at the DMV, he doubled down, spinning the narrative to his colleagues behind closed doors, in break rooms and between desk shifts. He casually painted Lena as another con artist playing the disability card to skirt the rules. His words dripped with smug certainty. "You can't imagine how many of them roll in here with a sob story," he scoffed, tossing a coffee cup into the trash. "Blind today, driving illegally tomorrow." His colleagues, weary and overworked, offered half-hearted laughs or avoided the conversation altogether. Some were uneasy, but silence was easier than conflict. Elijah Ford, a young clerk new to the office, wasn't laughing. Quiet but observant, Elijah had seen enough in his first months to notice a troubling pattern. Jason wasn't just toughy, targeted vulnerable citizens with calculated cruelty. The elderly man with Parkinson's dismissed over minor paperwork, the immigrant woman berated for her accent, the veteran in a wheelchair humiliated over expired plates. Elijah filed the details away, but fear and hierarchy kept him from speaking up. The department had a way of protecting its own, and Jason's reputation for walking the line, never enough for formal charges, always enough to intimidate, was well known. Meanwhile, Lena's world constricted with each passing day. Without her truck, the simplest tasks became ordeals. She missed 2 specialist appointments, each critical for managing her vision loss. Walking long distances with her cane left her disoriented, vulnerable to city traffic and indifferent strangers. Her health slipped further into uncertainty. Pride refused to let her ask for charity. But quiet despair crept in at night, filling the edges of her small home with dread. In the stillness, memories of Marcus flooded back. His deep voice, steady like an anchor, echoed in her mind during the hardest moments. "You're tougher than you know, Lee," he'd tell her, tracing his fingers along the lines of her hand. Asterisk, "the world will try to knock you down. Stand anyway." His words weren't just comfort, they were armor now. That armor strengthened the day Rachel Diaz showed up on Lena's doorstep. A sharp, driven community advocate with a reputation for fighting city injustice, Rachel had heard whispers of Lena's encounter at the DMV. Her compassion came laced with determination. "This isn't new," Rachel explained, handing Lena a folder thick with testimonies. "Jason Miller's been pushing people around for years, especially the ones least able to fight back." Reluctantly, Lena agreed to attend a small support group Rachel organized at a local church basement. The room buzzed with quiet frustration as others shared stories of humiliation, harassment, and Jason's unchecked arrogance. Elderly residents, disabled veterans, working-class citizens, silenced by fear, all carrying the same thread of injustice. The air thickened with tension as the pieces connected. But Jason wasn't done asserting his power. Days later, Lena's cane tapped along the scuffed floors of her neighborhood grocery store as she tried to navigate the crowded aisles. She fumbled, trying to find items by memory, her independence stretched thin. That's when Jason's voice cut through the hum of conversational, mocking, unmistakable. "Look who's playing blind again." He sneered from across the produce section, sauntering toward her in full uniform, heads turned. Some shoppers froze, others quietly backed away. Jason's grin widened as he circled her, voice dripping with derision. "Guess you figured the sympathy scam wasn't working at the DMV, so now you're out here fishing for pity points." Lena's grip tightened around her cane, her other hand brushing instinctively over Marcus's dog tags beneath her shirt. Her pulse hammered, but she stood her ground, refusing to shrink beneath the weight of his cruelty. Unbeknownst to Jason, a young woman nearby had pulled out her phone, camera recording as the scene unfolded. The video captured every venom-laced word, Jason's uniformed authority twisting into public humiliation. His disregard for Lena's visible disability on full display. By the time Jason walked away, smirking and self-satisfied, the footage was already uploading to social media. It didn't go viral overnight, but quietly, the video circulated through neighborhood forums, disability rights groups, and veterans networks. Faces of strangers watching on their screens hardened with outrage. Sympathy for Lena began to build, and with it, the first flickers of accountability Jason could no longer control. The video spread faster than Jason Miller anticipated. By the time it reached Major Karen Edwards, head of internal affairs for the department, it had already stirred quiet outrage in corners of the city. Jason had long dismissed the veterans groups, disability rights advocates, community leaders, fed up with unchecked authority. Major Edwards watched the footage twice, her expression sharpening with every mocking word Jason hurled at Lena Parker in that grocery store. She'd seen arrogance before, but this wasn't just a lapse in judgment, it was systemic, and it reeked of cover-upstart almost simultaneously. A sealed envelope landed on Major Edwards' desk. Elijah Ford's personal investigation file. Neatly compiled, the documents traced Jason's pattern of misconduct. Reports buried, complaints dismissed, vulnerable citizens harassed and belittled. At the back of the file was the explanation Elijah had quietly confirmed through whispers and department gossip. Jason Miller wasn't just skating by on arrogance. He was shielded. His older brother, Captain Ronald Miller, a respected veteran of the force, had quietly pulled strings to keep Jason's record clean, ensuring disciplinary actions never stuck. It was the kind of corruption Edwards had spent her career trying to root out. The timing couldn't have been more perfect or damning. Within days, Major Edwards scheduled a formal disciplinary hearing, inviting both media and community observers to witness the proceedings. It wasn't just about Jason, now it was about public trust, transparency, and accountability. The hearing room was tense, the hum of quiet murmurs mixing with the distant clicks of recording equipment. Jason sat stiff in his chair, his confident smirk faded but not entirely gone. His lawyers sat beside him, whispering strategies, but the bravado Jason carried into every confrontation was faltering. Lena Parker entered the room, cane in hand, dark glasses masking the storm beneath. Her posture was fragile but resolute. The courtroom cameras broadcast her every step across local news stations and streaming platforms. Community centers, veterans halls, and homes across the city watched, remembering the woman from the viral video, the widow, the teacher, the woman humiliated for simply trying to survive. Taking her seat, Lena's voice wavered at first as she addressed the hearing panel, but strength returned as she spoke of Marcus's dedication to the army, his unwavering support of her dreams, his death that left a gaping hole in her life. She described the worsening of her blindness, the daily battles against isolation and fear, and finally, the public humiliation officer, Jason Miller, subjected her to not just at the DMV, but again at the grocery store. "I've lost enough," Lena said quietly, fingers brushing the dog tags at her neck. "But I refuse to lose my dignity." With a nod from Major Edwards, the viral video played on the courtroom monitors. Jason's words, dripping with cruelty, filled the room. His sneers, his dismissive laughter, the raw footage of him circling a visibly disabled woman as bystanders. Watched, none of it could be explained away. Jason shifted in his chair, jaw tight. When given the floor, he launched into his defense, voice rising with rehearsed indignation. He claimed Lena exaggerated her disability for sympathy, that she played the system, and the video, while unfortunate, didn't show the full context. But the defense unraveled quickly. Major Edwards produced Lena's medical records, official, dated, and irrefutable, confirming her legal blindness diagnosis, the progressive nature of her condition, and the specialized care she required. The courtroom fell silent. Cameras panned across the crowd, capturing widening eyes and clenched jaws as reality settled in. There was no exaggeration, there was no manipulation. Lena Parker had told the truth all along. The hearing room filled with city officials, reporters, and community members, rippled with outrage as Jason's defense collapsed. On screens across Atlanta, viewers reacted in real time, some with disbelief, many with anger. The woman they saw humiliated for her disability had been telling the truth, and the officer entrusted to serve had exploited his authority, protected by a system designed to shield its own. Jason's face, once smug and untouchable, now mirrored the fear of accountability finally knocking on his door. The disciplinary hearing concluded with swift consequences. Jason Miller, once untouchable behind his badge and family connections, was suspended pending a full investigation. With the mountain of evidence, including Elijah's file, Lena's testimony, and the viral video, it was clear his future in uniform was crumbling. The threat of termination loomed large, and for the first time, Jason was stripped of the arrogance that had shielded him for years. In the days that followed, the community's response was overwhelming. Messages of support poured in for Lena. From every corner of Atlanta, veterans groups, disability advocates, and ordinary citizens rallied behind her, their voices louder than the quiet humiliation she had once endured. Neighbors she barely knew stopped her on the street to thank her for standing up, for exposing not just Jason, but the cracks in a system meant to protect the vulnerable. The city clerk's office reversed the impound order on Marcus's old truck within a week. When Lena ran her hands along the familiar dense and worn steering wheel, it felt like reclaiming a piece of her husband, a fragment of the independence she thought she'd lost for good. But the most unexpected gesture came from the Horizon Foundation, a local non-profit dedicated to empowering people with disabilities. They offered to outfit the truck with accessible upgrades, special controls, enhanced safety features, everything Lena would need to drive confidently despite her vision loss. For the first time in months, the crushing weight of helplessness lifted, replaced by possibility. The grief for Marcus never left it, lingered in the quiet corners of the house, in the empty space beside her at night. But Lena's world slowly began to rebuild. At Rachel Diaz's urging, she returned to music, volunteering with a community program that provided lessons to disabled youth. The classroom was smaller than the one she'd once taught in, but the laughter, the cautious plucking of guitar strings, The hopeful uncertainty of children learning their first note-sit was all the same. Each session reminded Lena that loss didn't erase purpose. In teaching those children, in guiding them through their own battles with disability, she found fragments of healing. The ache of Marcus's absence remained, but alongside it bloomed a renewed sense of strength, quiet, unyielding kind he had always seen in her. She was no longer just surviving. She was standing, weeks later. Lena stood outside the same DMV where everything had unraveled. The summer sun warm against her face, her cane resting lightly in her hand. The chaos of the city moved around her honking cars. Distant chatter, but she stood still, waiting for the rideshare arranged by the support network that had quietly surrounded her since the hearing. Her truck was still undergoing the accessibility upgrades, but for the first time in a long while, waiting didn't feel like vulnerability, felt like choice. Footsteps approached, steady but cautious. She turned slightly as Elijah's familiar voice broke through the noise. "It's done," he said gently. "Jason's been dismissed. Officially. His record's public now. He can't hide behind anyone anymore." Lena's fingers drifted to the cool metal of Marcus's dog tags resting against her chest, the small, worn tokens that had carried her through grief, humiliation, and quiet defiance. A soft smile curled at the corner of her lips, grief and resilience woven together. "In the gesture, he always said no one could silence me," she murmured, her voice steady with quiet pride. "Even without my sight." The rideshare car pulled up, engine humming, the open door waiting. Lena took a slow breath, adjusted her grip on the cane, and stepped forward, not as a victim, but as a woman, reclaiming her space in the world. The camera lingered on her face, etched with loss but unbroken, as she disappeared into the car, moving forward into the unknown with unshaken resolve.